Hey, welcome back to Diabolic Shrimp, the least professional talk show on the internet. I'm your host, I'm sorry, Josh Grant, a best-selling author and comic creator. And today I want to get to our special guest I'm excited about. Our special guest today is Richard Storry. Richard Storry, he writes in several different genres. I've read some of his fantasy series, which is excellent. And today he's going to get a chance to talk a lot about his mystery, kind of like this enigmatic series of building a compelling mystery, and it's kind of this Da Vinci Code-esque kind of series. And he also writes in the children's books, and he's working on a new one coming up, which is exciting. So just a bit about him before we get into talking with him. Before embarking on the cryptic lines, Richard had long cherished the idea of wanting to write fiction ever since attending a literature event with Leon Garfield and winning first prize in its short story competition. Having already been adapted for the stage, The Cryptic Lines has been described as Dan Brown meets Agatha Christie. I would agree with that. And as the plot weaves through its many twists and turns, we follow the main characters as they race against the clock to solve enigmatic puzzles in the many dark corners of the ancient manor house, Heston Grange. However, Richard's output now extends to a total of 13 books. Among others, his catalog includes a 6-volume saga, Ruritanian Rogues, which I read a portion of that, as well as a collection of short mystery tales and a book of stories for children. So, like I said, he has this whole collection of stories, very imaginative, very descriptive. So he's been waiting in the wings for a bit. I don't want to leave him out there for too long. So, Richard, welcome to Diabolic Shrimp.
Josh, hello, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, well, it's so fantastic to have you on. I mean, I've read a portion of your work. You build these mysteries. Your description is excellent, so it's going to be so much fun to get to talk about that today.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, for starters, you won this, that's kind of how you got your start, is writing these short stories in this literature competition. So what was your short story about?
Well, it was actually a ghost story, but written from the point of view of the ghost.
Nice.
Usually people are kind of hiding away in closed rooms with chains rattling and they're all terrified. But I thought it might be quite nice to write a story from the point of view of the ghost. And that won me the first prize, which was, nice at the time. But it was only a kiddie story. But the idea stayed with me. And then many, many years later, when I wrote one of the books I've written, in fact, I shall show it to you.
Yes, please do. Yeah, get those books up there. We're all about shameless self-promotion. Get it up there.
This is the one we're going to talk about, but this is a book I wrote of short stories, and I revisited this idea about a ghost story written from the point of view of the ghost. And so one of these short stories is a retelling of that one that I wrote many years ago. Hopefully now it's a bit more fluent and a bit more interesting, but that's where it came from. And all these years later, it resurfaced in my book. So that's
and that's for everyone out there. It's the book of names there. It's award winning. That's I'll point that out again. You won this award right off. And so I appreciate you writing from the perspective of the ghost, because I'm actually, even though I write horror books, I'm a best-selling horror author, but I'm a big scaredy cat. So it's nice to be the monster, It's instead of being the person being scared by the monster. And so quick shout out to all of our people down there live chat. I know we have some people that are viewing this live. We have Joe Sorrell 39YT down there commenting, I see. So welcome. If you guys have any questions for Richard, by all means, throw them out there. I'll throw it to him. So, Richard, let's start real quick. I always love to get to know people a bit better before we ask about their books. So let's talk about you for a second. Did you bring us anything for show and tell?
I did indeed.
All right.
I was racking my brains trying to decide what would be an appropriate item. Well, some of the musical work that I've done, separate to the writing, but it's taken me all over the world. And I'm always on the lookout for interesting little souvenirs in different countries where I've been. And one time I was working in Kenya, in deepest Africa. And I went and found this little souvenir shop, and they were selling these. And I'll just hold this out. I want to make sure you can all see this.
Yeah.
If I just move it, there we are. Now that's like a little ornate sort of box. And on the top there, that's supposed to be a little mouse sitting on top of the lid. And it's a sliding lid. And when you open it, I'm just trying to make sure that you can see.
I'm waiting for Pandora's box, all the evil of the world seeps out or something. It's right. So mysterious.
When you slide it open, Is this going to work? Out comes a little
Oh, nice.
snake. As you do it, a snake comes out to bite your finger like that. I think it's after the mouse. There we are. So anyway, the reason why, can you see that? So it's as you slide the lid over. So the reason why I thought this would be an appropriate item to bring is because many of my books, and particularly the cryptic lines, which we're going to talk about in a moment, are full of mysteries and twists and turns and unexpected things. And shortly after I bought this and I came home, someone came round just for afternoon tea one day, and I said, look at this thing that I brought back from Kenya. And I didn't tell him what it did, and I just handed it over. And he went like that, and of course he opened the lid, and the snake just shot out and bit his finger, and he positively jumped because it really took him by surprise. But anyway.
Yeah, I was like, fun fact, Richard's books actually do that too. Like one of the pages in the cryptic lines, when you turn it, like a snake jumps out of you. So look for it in there. So that's a blast. What were you doing in Kenya?
Oh, well, away from the writing, I do a lot of music examining work. So if you've ever known anybody who's played a musical instrument or was learning a musical instrument, you may have heard them say something like, oh, next week I'm doing my piano grade 5 exam or my violin grade 3 or something like that. Well, I'm the bad-tempered so-and-so who sits behind the desk and decides whether they pass the exam or not.
Yeah, when we're done with the interview here, I'll show you. I've got a ukulele back there, and I'll play that and let you give me scowl at me because I have zero musical aptitude. I was learning how to like play the piano and when I was working at a camp, and we had this massive flash flood and it destroyed the building and killed the piano, and I was pretty sure it was like divine intervention, God's like, no, you're done. So and a welcome down there to Andrea Hintz, another author as well. She's down there commenting for you. She gave you a good job on your show and tell as well. And so all right, let's dive in. You just mentioned we just mentioned music, right? You're also a gifted composer, so do you feel like your connection to music helps you in your writing or vice versa?
I think that the two are kind of interchangeable. One bounces off the other, really. Certainly, having done the musical side of things for a great many years, the writing of the books was something that I'd always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to have a go at. And when the time eventually came, and the thought hit me quite forcibly one day that said, well, if you want to do some writing, why don't you just sit down and get on with it? Because it's not going to write itself. And when I began to do it, I actually found it quite liberating to be doing something that was creative, but not musical, just for a change. But the actual creative process was very similar. There are a great number of parallels between the two things. Writing a book is in many ways the same as writing a large-scale piece of music. You've got to have the development and the overarching shape of the thing. So in a way, it was a path that I had already explored before, but now I was doing it in a slightly different arena.
You give me hope, saying it's like writing is similar to like writing a large piece of music. Maybe someday I can actually build my musical aptitude. I can actually play that ukulele back there. So like, what would you say, like for you though? It's like what was your what's been your biggest challenge, or what's kind of like your kryptonite when it comes to like writing?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. When you say
biggest, what would you say is your biggest challenge? Like it's kind of like kryptonite with like Superman. It's kind of like your weakness in a way. Like what's the challenging thing that you have to get over? I apologize.
Right. Okay. I think it's the same as for any author, and that is that you get days where you sit there staring at the screen that's got nothing on it apart from the little thing going blink, 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 kind of goading you to try and write something. Because some days you sit there and the words just won't come. It's like trying to chisel it out of solid rock. On the other hand, there are other days when it flows really well. But on those days when nothing seems to be forthcoming, I find that the best thing I can do is just start writing anyway. And even though it feels like I'm chiseling out the granite, sometimes just starting to type the words, it begins to gather its own momentum. And sometimes actually some of my most satisfying chapters or paragraphs have come from moments like that. So, you must never despise the fact that you don't seem to have anything. Sometimes it all comes from a subliminal place somewhere deep down inside that isn't necessarily a conscious avenue of thought at the time.
Yeah, I actually connect with you on that. I feel like some of my best writing came from like that writer's block, if you will. I always say 90% of writing is staring off into space, and 10% is actually writing something. So it sounds like you've traveled right to like Kenya and stuff. It sounds like you've gotten a chance to travel around a bit. What was one of your favorite places that you had a chance to get out there?
One of my favorite places was also the furthest place from here, and that was the South Island of New Zealand.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Went to Hobbiton, right?
I didn't actually. That was
Oh,
one
no.
I didn't get to go to. But I was with one particularly fine place. I was taken right up, way up in the mountains to do the music examining work at someone's mansion of a house. It was an enormous place. And when I got out of the car, I stood there looking at this fantastic view stretching away, like mountain range after mountain range and glorious green fields and everything. It was just magical. It was like the opening scene of The Sound of Music, but 100 times better. And I became aware that the owner of the house was standing at a slight distance, looking at me, looking at the view. And after a while, I turned towards her, and she was kind of looking at me like this. And she said, "You like our view, don't you?" And I said, "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life." And she said, "Well, you've come on a good day. But during the winter," she said, "the wind comes howling round those hills. We're all by the fire, huddled in our blankets. But yes, you've come on a good day today."
Well, please tell me that you actually got out there and started belting it out like in The Sound of Music. I want to believe that anyway. So
I didn't have a copy.
Being the musical person you are. So like you write in this whole span of genres, and I mean you do a fantastic job in all of them. Like which genre would you say is kind of your favorite to kind of explore in?
Ooh. I'm asked that a lot. I'm asked which is my favorite genre, and I'm asked which is my favorite book out of all the ones I've written. And my answer has to be, well, I love all of them. Now, I know that I have been told a number of times over the years, it would be really better if you just focused on one genre, focus on one type of book, because then your readers know what to expect. And I do appreciate there is merit in that advice, because if you pick up something by Agatha Christie, it's going to be a whodunit. If you pick up something by John Grisham, it's going to be a legal thriller, etc., etc. Well, if you pick up something by me, it could be one of quite a few different things. But as time has gone on, I've noticed that people who have perhaps picked up my mystery book first, if they've enjoyed it, they're willing to come back and try the adventure one, or one of the fantasy ones, or the comedy that I've done as well. And so I'm hoping, as time goes on, that if I were to be pigeonholed into some particular category, that my pigeonhole would say above it, cross genre, that people would be ready to accept that I can write in a variety of different styles, and that hopefully the stories are just as engaging, whichever genre it is.
Yeah, and I'm once again I'm connecting with you. I'm also someone that likes to write across genres, and I've actually found the same thing. That once people like kind of check out one, they check out another one, and then they usually they usually give me like lower star ratings for like one that, because it's super different, all my genres. So I don't know if you've noticed that as well, but most of your work though is I can't say most of it, because it's kind of like half and half, with like a lot of your work is also fantasy, but it's like most of your work is also centered with like the world of mystery. Like, what is the key or keys to writing a compelling mystery? Because that's what you do.
If I knew the answer to that in one easy sentence, I think I'd be very wealthy indeed. I think it's a game of cat and mouse between the author and the reader, and you have to lead them along in a way that makes them think they know what they're coming to, but then you suddenly spring out and surprise them with something. I was nearly going to give away a bit of a plot point there with an example. I don't want to give away any examples.
Like the snake in your puzzle box, it comes out of nowhere.
That's right. And so it's so difficult to answer your question without actually giving away anything that's actually in the books themselves. Suffice it to say, I think surprise is the element. So, of course, things like ending a chapter, or indeed ending a particular book on a cliffhanger, is always a good technique to employ. But if you can leave your reader thinking they know where they're going, and then suddenly, bam, you've come out with some surprise. And in my mystery books, I think I can say reasonably confidently that I do achieve that, particularly with
Yes, please do. Hold it up.
The Cryptic Lines. It's a slightly dark cover. You can see the title just there. I don't want it to. If you can, I don't know whether you can see.
It's okay. It's part of the mystery of it. The cryptic lines. It slowly
Well,
fades out of the cover.
So that's the one that indeed has lots of cryptic clues in there that the protagonists have to solve to reach the end of the trail and inherit the vast fortune, including that enormous house that you see on the front there.
Yes, and so yeah, let's actually dive into that. Yeah, Richard's all about surprise. So like you said, you're not going to expect what happens later on. Just like later in the show, like Richard wasn't expecting he's going to sing opera for all of you at the end of this. So get ready for it. Stick around. And welcome, by the way, Film Time 3. It looks like you're down there commenting as well. If any of you has a question for Richard, I will gladly throw it to him. So let's dive into the cryptic lines. Though. I really want to dive into this series. It's a really cool mystery kind of series of like you said, it's like that puzzle box that you had. It's like almost like this whole mansion is a giant puzzle box, and you got all these clues throughout, and they're trying to get this inheritance, and it's almost like a national treasure kind of Da Vinci Code-esque kind of, but it's really awesome to like the surprises and the twists. So here's the first lines of the cryptic lines, and I always like to play the murder game when you murder a book is what I say. It's that you take the first few lines and then you add and then the murders began and see how it works for the fun of it. So here we go. Let's see if it holds up to the test. The night it all began, there was nothing foreboding to be seen at first, but the damp, clinging atmosphere was thick and heavy. Had you been standing there trying in vain to see through the impenetrable darkness, with lashing rain repeatedly stinging your face, the cold combined chills of uncertainty, fear, and danger would have been unmistakable. As your torchlight flickered and died, you would have wrapped your cloak tightly about you as the wind howled, and peered as deeply as you could into the surrounding gloom and murk, hoping that somehow you might glimpse a way by which you could leave this place, with its unbearable sense of dread. And then the murders began. It kind of works. And so, yes, filled with dread, this mysterious place in the cryptic lines. Richard, tell us a bit about the cryptic lines.
Well, the story begins at night in the middle of a violent storm, and it's set in this very gothic, ancient English mansion house, miles from anywhere. And I deliberately don't name a specific location. The opening preface of the book describes it that it's in a remote coastal location somewhere in the British Isles. So I'm not actually admitting exactly where it is.
Central London. It's a flat.
That's right. And this extraordinarily large, sprawling mansion is inhabited by a very old recluse. But he's an extremely wealthy recluse. He's made an absolute fortune during the time that he's been alive. And knowing that he doesn't have long left to go, he's trying to decide what would happen to all this vast sum of money after he departs. Now, he does have a son, but this son has done nothing but waste his opportunities, waste his time, waste his money all the way along. And this
is just like me.
Well,
it's based on me.
You're my inspiration for this story. But he knows that if he just hands over this huge fortune to his son, it'll just get frittered away on useless, stupid things. So he doesn't know what to do. And in the end, he decides that in one last-ditch effort to try and convey to his son the importance of applying yourself to a task and sticking with it to the end, he decides to set his last will and testament in the form of a puzzle, which is the cryptic lines from which the book takes its title. This poem is presented, and in this poem are contained a number of cryptic clues which must be solved in order for the son to inherit the vast fortune. It, however, emerges that the son, in the end, is not the only interested party. And of course, this rambling old mansion has a lot of secrets about it, which are waiting to be discovered as the story progresses. And the various people who live there, the servants, the staff, and the people who are all involved also have secrets which are all waiting to be discovered. And even when you get to the end and you think, oh, well, that's the end, then there's still another twist waiting for you when you get there. So it's quite an exciting tale, so much so that after people had got to the end of it, they said you must write a sequel. And it took me a long time. I really wanted to write a sequel because to return to the house called Heston Grange I loved the place, and I really wanted to go back there. And I did dabble with a couple of ideas, but nothing quite grabbed me until one day an idea did grab me, and the result was this one, which is called The Enigma of Heston Grange. This is the sequel to the Cryptic Lines. And this one also, in fact, it's a bit thicker. I don't know whether the eagle-eyed people watching, there's actually more in this one. It's a weightier read. And we discover again that the house has still more secrets that they didn't find first time round.
So what was the challenge of writing a sequel then? Especially in like a mystery kind of book, and like with like twists and all that you built into it. It's sometimes hard to like springboard off of that. So what was the big challenge of like diving into a sequel?
That's a very good question. And the challenge was that if people were going to pick up the sequel having already read the first one, of course they would have a certain level of expectation. They would expect it to be a certain type of story. But the challenge was, how do I satisfy that expectation without just simply churning out more of the same? And so it was a balancing act, really, of using features from the first story to satisfy the expectation, but also bringing in new things, new material, new characters. And feedback would suggest that I have managed to achieve that. So I'm very glad about that.
Yeah, well, fun fact, like all poems are actually like lead to treasure, I assume. So just like in the story. So what existing series would you say like the Cryptic Lines is kind of closest to, like similar to?
Well, as you mentioned in your opening comments, it has been described as Agatha Christie meets Dan Brown. Dan Brown, of course, was famously the author of the Da Vinci Code, which is basically one sequence of puzzles after another until they reach the end of that particular trail. And in a way, it's a bit like that. It's a different style, a different setting, certainly. But yes, they have this feeling, if we can solve this puzzle, well, then everything will be all right. But they solve it and then discover, oh, here's another one. And oh, here's another one. And in the end, they despair. They wonder if there's ever going to be an end to the trail at all. Well, you'll read it to find out.
Well, so you built this like really cool, like compelling kind of, and you mentioned it, like Da Vinci Code kind of, I mentioned it too. It's like it is very like you said, it's a different style than Da Vinci Code. It has a different feel, but it is kind of similar in a way. But and you packed it all with twists. Like, where did you as an author like start in crafting this enigma? I mean, like, that's what I just think is so cool. People that build puzzles are so brilliant like you. And like where do you start in that? Like, do you like start with the end and work your way back, or how's that work?
Oh, now I do have an answer to that question, but I'm wondering, you see, if I tell you what the answer is.
Okay. I was like, don't spoil anything. That's the challenge. We had to talk all about this mystery book, but without spoiling anything.
Yeah. What I think I can tell you safely is this, is that with a story like this, where they're having to get to the end of a trail, the main focus of the story is, of course, reaching the end of that trail. And when I was writing it, eventually, in due course, I reached the point where they got there. That they reached the end of the trail. Oh no, I've just given it away. But when we got there, I found myself thinking, oh, so is that it then? Okay, they've got to the end, but it's a little bit anticlimactic somehow. And I realized at that point that I needed a big finish. Something else extra had to happen. And if anyone who's watching this now decides to take a risk and actually read the Cryptic Lines, I think you'll notice when it gets to that point where they reach the end of the trail and you think, well, that's the end of the book. No, it isn't. There's a huge kick in the teeth surprise waiting for you that I had to add on extra at the end. So because you've been watching the Diabolic Shrimp today, you're privy now to that inside information. The ending was kind of tagged on, but it does actually bring the whole thing to life in a much more effective way than would have been the case if I hadn't added that on, I think.
Yeah, see, I've always been a huge fan of it's like the scene after the credits in movies. Like growing up, I used to watch all like the old like kind of like 90s horror kind of things, and at the end of the credits it was always like the killer wasn't actually the killer. I would always like watch like credits before Marvel made it kind of mainstream, so it's like that's why I love about books like this, where it's like it's not actually over. Dun, dun, dun. So, which is pretty cool. And so did you tie any clues into like the book or writing style itself? Like if I read it and see this like scratch mark on like page 77, will I find some like treasure in real life or something? Or without spoilers.
Since it's just you and I, and it's just you and I talking privately and no one else is listening, I will tell you that the cryptic lines are themselves a poem. And this poem was not written by me. It was already in existence. And having got the basic idea for the book, I spent a lot of time sorting through a great many poems, trying to find one that would be suitable for this particular purpose. And in the end, I found one. So when you first encounter the cryptic lines, it is actually a genuine, real poem. But the reader of the book isn't told that straight away. Now, because it is a genuine, real poem, it's just possible that someone who reads the book might already have encountered it themselves. And sometimes if I'm feeling brave enough, I'll ask someone who's read it, did you know that poem already before you started reading the book? And out of all the people I've spoken to so far, there was only one single person who did recognize it in advance. So I managed to find one that was by a well-known poet, but one of the more obscure poems. So hopefully people would kind of cotton on. But now
Dr. Seuss, it was.
Yeah.
Never heard of him. So, all right, well, and you kind of hinted on some of this too, but it's like, we'll try to avoid spoilers as always, because you have such awesome twists in your books. But what was one of the most fun segments for you to write?
I think the most entertaining part of all was actually in the sequel, where another message is uncovered that basically warns that people are after. It's difficult to sum this up very succinctly, but this old elderly recluse I've been talking about, he made a lot of enemies along the way, and they were trying to track him down. And he sends this message. He leaves a message after his death that says, if they come looking for me, don't worry, go down into the basement and I've left something there and you can use that to sort everything out. It'll all be all right. And of course, they're left with this impression that there's this room full of gold or jewels or something, because this wealthy fellow, he's got so much money that if someone that he sends along his gang of thugs to collect on the money, it's all right, go down to the basement, you'll find it there, it's okay, you can pay them off and everything will be all right. And then the gist of the book is following all these clues to find where this secret room is in the basement that's got all this money in there that's going to bail them out of the mess. But when they do eventually find it, it's not money they find in there at all. It's something completely different that you would never have expected. And this is one of those moments that I was referring to earlier, where I lead the readers down a particular route. They're expecting to find something when they go through the door into that room, and what they actually find is not what they were expecting at all. So there you go.
Well, that's why I love, like, see, I just love twists. All my books have twists too, and it's like that to me as a writer is what gets me excited. Just like I like that, like just maybe because I was a scaredy cat or something, and I would start with horror. I was like, I like being the person that gets to jump out and say boo, but I like having a twist and seeing what happens, and that's what I love about your writing. All your writing that I've read, not even just like the mysteries, but like the fantasy also has all these kind of like almost like mystery built into it, which is what I love about it, is just the twist. And so is there anything that like didn't make it into the book? Like, is there anything like you maybe wanted to do, or you were doing and it just wasn't working and you just kind of nixed?
If there was, I have to confess I can't remember what it was now, because Cryptic Lines, I actually wrote it a long time ago. It's actually a very interesting story in itself, because after I had that little conversation with myself, when I said, okay, if you want to write a book, why don't you just get on with it? So I wrote it, but that was in the days just before the internet had really taken off. People were talking about it, but it was very much in its infancy. It wasn't like now, where it's in everyone's home and in everyone's pocket.
Yeah.
So having written it, I did the traditional thing of sending it around to various publishers. Couldn't get anyone interested in it at all. And because I couldn't get anyone interested in it, I didn't know what to do with it then. So it just sat on the shelf gathering dust. And it sat there on the shelf gathering dust for 7 years. And then one day, right out of the blue, I received an email from one of my old school English teachers from years and years ago, who he'd stumbled across my website and sent me a message and said, oh, it'd be lovely to get in touch and catch up with all the news. Why don't we do that? So we met up and had lunch. And because he was my English teacher, you see, one of the things I happened to say was, well, I wrote this book, but I can't get anyone to publish it. If he'd been my chemistry teacher, I don't think I'd have bothered. But he was my English teacher, so I mentioned this. And he just said, and I can trace it all back to this one moment. He said, have you considered ebooks? Well, I hadn't. I just hadn't even thought of that. If I had thought of it, it was just, well, one day it'll be published and all that will happen as part of the process. But when I looked into it and I found, yes, you can do it as an ebook. You can just put it out there. So I did. But that was my first very tentative step into the world of publishing. And after it had been there for a little while, people came to me and said, I'd love to buy your book, but I don't like all these ebooks. I want a proper real book with real pages. So when you publish it for real, then come and tell me and I'll buy it. And I thought, well, I can't manufacture books. I don't know how to do that. So that was that. But after it had been available as an ebook for a little while, an email came along one day saying, do you realize that we can publish this for you in real paperback form if you want? And I went, oh, can you? All right, let's do it then. So I was being spoon-fed through the process, and we did that. And a little while after that, along came another message that said, do you realize you can have your book in audio format if you like? Oh, can I? All right. So there was another step forward, and little by little, I've just been groping my way along in this new arena and been spoon-fed the information all the way. And so now virtually all my books, well, they all exist as Kindle e-reader versions and paperback, and virtually all of them also in audio format as well, which have proved very popular, especially, I might say, in your great country of the USA. The Cryptic Lines has proved immensely popular. It seems like over there you kind of like the old English Gothic mansion being described by someone with a very English sounding voice, and I'm very grateful.
We love our English accents. That's why all of our actors are actually English. Yeah. So. But and welcome, by the way. It looks like we have Charlie down there in the comments. Everyone's saying hi to you, by the way. So I guess you can wave at everyone. So like for you, like what's next for the series? I mean, is there any side stories you want to explore, or are you planning like even more like sequels? Is there anything building in your mind?
Well, Cryptic Lines, as I mentioned, now has a sequel, The Enigma of Heston Grange. So those two exist there. Number one, number two. People have already asked me, well, are you going to do a third installment then? Well, again, I'm not going to give away anything, but I will simply say that if there were to be a third installment, it would be very difficult to set it in the same location. You have to read the book to find out why that would be. However, I do have some sequels. Now this, Mr. Grant, this is the one that you actually read yourself a long time ago.
Yep.
Which is volume 1 in my adventure saga. And this one is in a series, quite deliberately so. And the person who suggested to me to write this, he said, what you should do is write the first volume, and at the end, you include a note from the author to the reader, inviting them to contact you and suggest things that might happen to the characters or plot points that may happen along the way. So that there is, if you get this book and read it, you'll find that in the back, there's a thing saying, dear reader, please get in touch with me. And here's an email address that you can contact and give me some ideas. And basically, and I did get some people started to get in touch with me and suggest things. And so we got volume 2, which is this one with this rather scary cover on the front there, which led to volume 3, A Shroud of Darkness. Oh, no,
yes.
There we are.
Oh, I haven't read that. I haven't read that one actually. So yeah, this is a great throwback, by the way. I was like, oh, I remember that one. Yes. I was like, it's a great series. And by the way, yeah, if you're down there in our live chat, like Addison, I can see is down there as well. I was like, go ahead and throw in there. Like, what should Richard do with all of his characters? And suddenly, and then the murders began.
Well, here's the thing. The thing is that one person who contacted me said, is there any possibility that I could actually feature in one of your books? Could you write me in? And I wrote back and said, well, that's a great idea. He said, I want to play a king, and I could come on a state visit. That would be exciting. And what would be really great is if I could be the target of an assassination attempt. You see. So I replied to him and I said, well, that's a great idea, and I'm sure I could come up with something. And then I added, I said, presumably you would prefer it if the assassination attempt was not successful. And he replied and said, oh, I'll leave you to deal with the details.
That's a dangerous prospect. I think it's funny that he actually wants to be like assassinated. I'll have people ask me to put me in someone's book, and I put them in my books, and I actually never write people into my book because I just don't feel like I could do a good enough job. And anyone that I ever slightly borrow from ends up dying in my books. So I was like, you don't want to be in my books. They're half the time they're horror books. So yeah, it looks like Joe's Roll 39 YT says, I say you kill someone in the book. Ha 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 ha. So I guess you got to kill somebody, Richard. It's like if it bleeds, it leads.
If there's anyone who you have got a personal vendetta against, just let me know.
Yeah. Anyone in the live chat, good luck with you guys. All right. So going back to your mystery series before we get a chance to listen to a piece of the audiobook, an excerpt from it. For someone reading your mystery series, what's your biggest spoiler-free hint for them before reading? Should they, I don't know, prepare for something or what? What's your big hint for them to try and figure it out?
Two things to say, I think. The first one is that in the let me pull it out again. So in volume 1, very early on, we meet the main character, who is you might call the darling of society. Everybody loves him. He's in the Ruritanian upper class. If you host a party, he's the person you must invite. No party is a party without him present. He's the one everybody loves and everyone wants to be seen with, and so on. But behind the scenes, he's actually a professional thief. And so when you invite him to your party, he'll be there shaking hands and smiling nicely. But actually what he's doing is he's casting his eye around to see, that looks like an expensive painting. I'll have to figure out a way I can steal that. Or those knives and forks look like they're made of gold. I'll have those, you see. But all the while,
you actually wrote me into your book without even knowing it.
Well, there's one person who knows about this, and that's this high up in the society, his manservant, who is very loyal, very long suffering, and has taken it upon himself to try and persuade his master to ditch his thieving addiction. But he's always he's got a bit of a balance to strike here, because as well as trying to keep him out of jail, he's his servant. So he has to look after him and make sure that all his clothes are ironed and all his meals are prepared and so on. And one of the things that this fellow really enjoys is when his manservant makes for him chocolate tiffin. It's his favorite thing to eat in all the world. And it keeps coming. He says, I really do like this tiffin. You've really surpassed yourself today. And that keeps coming back all the way through the book. And when you reach the very end, and I wonder whether I can actually show you this on the camera. Here. No.
I'm waiting for the snake to jump out again. Like I said.
Here it is. Well, here it is, because this is the last thing you'd be expecting in the back of an adventure book. Now, if I could just make sure that the camera can see that.
Yes. Ooh, okay. We can make our own chocolate tiffin delight. Zoom in, everybody.
Yeah, the recipe is there. You can make it. And I know it works because when I was invited to a readers group recently who had all read this and asked me lots of questions about it, one of them had actually made that recipe, and we all sat there drinking our tea and eating chocolate tiffin to get in the mood. So it was very successful.
Okay, I'm gonna start doing that. I'm not sure what kind of recipe I could put into one of my horror books. It's I'm not sure if I want to put a recipe in there. Like tentacle delight or something. I don't know.
I must tell you, the audio version of this, which is actually read by the same actor who did Cryptic Lines. He has this very atmospheric, very spooky sounding voice, and I didn't know he was going to do it. But on the end of this, he read the recipe out as well. So to hear this very spooky voice saying, crack the eggs and mix them in a bowl. It's just fantastic. It's one of the most whimsical things you'll ever hear.
Yeah, from now on, I think anytime I'm cooking, I'm making my hamburger helper, I'm just going to say that, brown the meat, throw in the noodles. He does have a very atmospheric voice. It's a great way to describe it. All right, well, let's get into that clip. One last question before we do. I love to ask everybody, like if there was like an existing series for you to write in, like an existing franchise, whether it's movies or video games or books, what would be an existing series that you would just love to write a story in?
I suppose it has to be something like Doctor Who, or
Yes.
that's what I grew up with. I presume you have Doctor Who over there, do you? You know what I'm talking about there?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, so I mean, when I was a little kid, I mean, Doctor Who was compulsive viewing, and if for some reason you were out of the house on Saturday night when they showed it, that was a major blot on the landscape, because you couldn't, not like now where you could go and dial it up and watch it anytime you like, or get the video or watch the DVD. Nothing like that. If you missed it, you missed it. That was it. So, and then it was made worse because on Monday morning you turn up at school and everyone was talking about it. Wasn't Doctor Who great on Saturday night? And what do you think is going to happen in the cliffhanger? And they all knew what it was, and you didn't know because for some reason you missed it.
And the Daleks killed him. No.
Well, exactly. So yes, I mean, I think if I had the choice, that would be a great fun thing to be involved in. So far, they haven't asked me. So if any of the writers are watching this, then you know where to find me.
We'll get them on it. Okay, so we're gonna try something a bit different today. Is that we don't typically do? Is we're gonna throw in a sound clip from your book. We usually read it, but I love the voice, like you said, of this guy. So I'm going to have to detach my audio, so audio might go crazy. But that's why we're the least professional talk show. Yes, Richard.
Just before you do, shall I just explain a little bit about it to put it in context?
Yeah. Actually, while I do, actually go for it. I was like, yeah, please set the scene for us.
Right. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the main, or one of the main characters in the Cryptic Lines, is this very elderly fellow, and eventually he does die. But he has decided to set his last will and testament not to paper, but to cinefilm. So this roll of cinefilm is discovered, and they set it all up, a little screen in the library. And this elderly lord delivers his last will and testament from the screen. So his solicitor is sitting there, the butler is sitting there, and his wastrel son is sitting there, all listening to him deliver his final verdict in life from the screen. But it's important to remember he's already passed on at this point. Okay, Josh, go ahead.
Same with Richard. Richard is actually already passed on. This is all pre-recorded. Not joking. Hopefully not ever. All right, here we go. The last will and testament, and hopefully you can hear it.
So, I suppose you'll finally be very happy to know that I am no longer resident in this world. And I suppose you're so absolutely stricken with grief that you're not even remotely concerned as to what little nest egg might be waiting for you from the modest estate which I am fortunate enough to have built up. Well, more of that in a moment. He paused for a second, then his gaze hardened as he continued. Now then, Matthew. Charles was sure the man physically jumped a little as his name was called. Your whole life has been characterized by wastefulness. Over and over again, you have wasted your own money on countless pea-brained schemes, and then you've come running to me for help to bail you out of your ever-increasing messes. His tone softened a little as he continued. I tried so hard to teach you all I could. I tried to instill in you the noble character which has been associated with the Willoughby name for generations. Was it asking too much to want my son to be a fine, upstanding citizen? An undercurrent of annoyance became apparent in his voice as he added, I'd love to be standing there right now to ask you what you think of such an impressive record of achievement. Matthew scowled and sank a little lower in his chair.
And then the murders began.
Well, after that, then he goes on to explain a bit about what's going to happen. And then, of course, he reads out the poem with those famous cryptic lines and sets the puzzle that has to be solved in order for the estate to be inherited.
Yeah, can you imagine? Like we have Joe Sproul 39YT was saying you could put it in like a blueberry muffin with a chocolate chip cookie inside of it. But can you imagine that man reading that? That would be amazing. I'm just gonna write a cookbook just to get this person to read it. But I love it's not so much like it's always, voice acting. I used to be an actor. And so it's like acting, like you can do a lot as an actor to bring something to life, but it's really about the writing. And I really just want to emphasize that, Richard, you're always very supportive of other people. You're always very kind. And so how can we, before we let you go, like, how can we support you as a community?
Well, thank you for the offer. That's very kind of you. Well, of course, to anyone who has read any of my books, I'd be grateful if you would help to spread the word. Perhaps if there's a particular one that you especially like, you might consider buying a second copy and giving it as a gift to somebody else. That's another option. All my titles you can find at my website, which is called crypticpublications.com. My music is at richardstory.com, which is STORRY, richardstory.com. Or if you just go to Amazon and type in my name, Richard Storry, in the books section, then all my titles appear there as well. And as I mentioned, they do exist in paperback, in e-reader, and for audio version too, as you just heard there. And in fact, that particular actor who was reading that one, of my 13 books, he has recorded 7 of them. So that's quite an achievement. But yes,
including your children's book.
Actually, no.
I'm joking.
My children's book is the one book where it's actually a female voice that reads that one. All the rest are male, as it turns out.
Groovy. Well, yeah. So, and definitely, and if you're out there watching this, all of Richard's books are actually down there in the description below. They a direct link there. So if you want to go check them out. So, Richard, thank you so much for spending the evening with us. I know it's starting to get a little bit late over there in England. So I appreciate you for being on.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great fun. We must do it again sometime.
Yes, indeed. And for those of you that are watching or have been watching our show, we are building up towards a special check-in segment. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see Richard in a couple of months and get to kind of check in and see where things are at. Like what's the next cryptic line story in a different setting. So, all right. Well, Richard, I'm going to send you back down below to the basement where there's lots of gold. So go down there and check it out. And so thank you for being on. And so, for everyone out there, thank you so much for spending time watching with us. It was a lot of fun getting to chat with you in our live chat. If you want to support Diabolic Shrimp as a channel, go ahead and check out some of my books down there in the description as well. Hit that subscribe button. Any extra money I get from this, I put towards universally good things like ocean exploration, childhood disease research. And so come check us out at diabolicshrimp.com as well. Check out any of my comics, and please do check out Richard's books down there in the description below. Go listen to that full audio book. I mean, it's like kind of music to the ears. It comes from a composer. So we appreciate you. Thanks for spending a bit of time with us. This has been another Diabolic Shrimp. Have a good night.